In the eyes of his parents, Steve was perceived as weak and unsuccessful. They had hoped to raise him as a worthy heir to their military dynasty, but Steve had his own vision of life. As a result, frequent conflicts erupted within the family. Steve failed to live up to the expectations placed upon him. His parents believed he was raised improperly and even chose the wrong spouse. In his mother's perspective, Steve's profession lacked masculinity. "It, what kind of work is that?" she would wonder. It seemed incomprehensible to her. She envisioned her son spending his days sitting in front of a computer, seemingly idle, and earning money for it. She couldn't fathom how such an occupation could be suitable for a real man. The fact that they had such a profound misunderstanding of Steve was deeply shameful and brought tears to their eyes. They had dedicated significant efforts to ensure their son followed in his father's footsteps, but he simply didn't want to. They tried to persuade him, begged him, and even resorted to threats. However, their efforts were met with resistance. "Mom, Dad, please don't take offense, but living my life according to your schedule gives me heartburn. I want to avoid West Point altogether," Steve defiantly expressed his feelings. "Understand that I want to live my own life, not the one you have invented for me." This kind of resistance led to constant outbursts of arguments and disputes. The woman resorted to emotional blackmail, saying, "Forget that you have parents, study wherever you want, but don't expect any support from me or your father." Steve, however, had already anticipated such a response. He excelled academically and stood out as the best in his class. Strangely, this only seemed to further irritate his parents. And then Steve crossed paths with Olivia. She had recently graduated from law school and was a few years older than him. But from their first meeting, she captivated Steve completely. No, Olivia didn't fit the mold of a stereotypical beauty with long legs and full lips. She had a charming, spirited demeanor, a great sense of humor, and a charisma that made it impossible for Steve to resist her. Steve fell deeply in love, unable to comprehend how he had ever lived and breathed without this woman. Just 2 months later, they tied the knot and decided to introduce themselves to their respective families. Steve's parents were livid. "What on earth is this?" raged John Miller, Steve's father. "This is beyond unacceptable. I find out about my daughter-in-law only after the wedding. They simply force their decisions upon us, without even bothering to hide it. This is the first time we're meeting your wife. What if she's a thief or something worse?" echoed her husband, Karen Miller. "Please, show your love and appreciation for my wife, Olivia. Apparently, our opinion doesn't matter at all." Fortunately, they directed all these remarks solely at their son. Olivia was spared from hearing what her new in-laws thought of her. Steve gathered his courage and decided to interrupt. "If you refuse to accept my wife, you won't see your grandchildren." Steve resorted to blackmail, taking a page from his mother's book. The scandal eventually subsided, but both parties parted ways feeling extremely dissatisfied. As time went by, Steve and Olivia welcomed their firstborn twins, Alex and Maya, followed by their youngest, Emily, 4 years later. The arrival of the children brought a fragile peace to the family, but it also revealed a crack. "Olivia, why are you sending the children to dance classes? I understand Maya, but Alex, he's a boy. Is that a suitable pursuit for a future man?" objected the mother-in-law, filled with indignation. "Well, soon only one of the children will continue with dancing," Olivia replied with a smile. "Maya doesn't enjoy it at all. She wants to enroll in karate." Karen Miller's expression changed, which even amused Olivia's sister-in-law. Olivia had long since developed immunity to the attacks from Steve's parents. There was no use getting worked up over nothing. It was better to approach everything calmly and with a sense of humor. "Olivia, girls should be girls, and boys should be boys. You have it all mixed up. Why are you indulging in these unhealthy hobbies? What kind of children are you raising?" Karen Miller attempted to maintain her composure, but she didn't succeed very well. I want to raise them to be good individuals who find joy in life, Olivia responded calmly. And whatever brings them that joy, let them choose for themselves. Realizing she couldn't win this argument, Karen Miller shifted her attention to Emily. You, little one, will be a true princess. You will make your grandmother proud, wearing beautiful dresses, learning to cook and sew. You will grow up to be a proper young lady, her mother-in-law declared loudly, ensuring that Olivia could hear her. Emily didn't mind much, as she didn't fully grasp her grandmother's words due to her young age. Olivia simply smiled at her mother-in-law's naive attempts to unsettle her. Meanwhile, the twins grew up and started attending the same school where their grandmother worked as a math teacher. Today, Steve went to pick up the children from school, a task he disliked immensely. It made him feel like a disobedient student, and he couldn't help but feel powerless in the situation. It all had to do with his mother, who seemed to have a knack for suddenly appearing out of nowhere and criticizing her grandchildren, often launching an attack on her own son as well. As the rebellious son passed by his mother's office, he let out a sigh of relief, hoping to avoid any confrontation. But by some twist of fate, Karen Miller still managed to show up nearby. When she spotted her son, a malicious joy lit up her face. Her son was within reach. It had been a while, and now she would tell him everything. Steve, why are you walking past? Aren't you coming to see your mother? I need to have a talk with you, and I can assure you it won't be pleasant. Karen Miller's voice transformed into righteous anger, growing louder. I would really like to know when you'll finally take responsibility for the upbringing of your children. Why do I keep receiving complaints about their behavior? Especially from Alex. Doesn't he have any energy left to spare? After all, he dances. He should be tired and behave calmly in class. The sarcasm and venom in her monologue surpassed all reasonable limits. Steve slowly turned around. How much longer could he tolerate this? He had long surpassed the age of being scolded like a schoolboy. And just recently, Maya punched one of her classmates. She claimed he had insulted her, but that's no excuse for a fight. She raged in self-righteous anger. Although, I suppose for a girl who has chosen martial arts as her hobby, it might seem normal. Perhaps it's not the children who should be disciplined, but the parents who allow anything and indulge every mischievous whim of their children. As Karen Miller's colleagues began to peek out of their offices, sensing the spectacle of a public scolding, Steve was driven to defend himself. Finally, he erupted. Of course, abnormal parents should be punished. And why are they considered abnormal? In fact, he pondered aloud. Yes, they don't mold their children. They allow them to pursue their passions and support them in every way. Steve spoke about the pressing issue, pouring out his pent-up emotions without concern for the unwilling listeners around him. Please us, fulfill our wishes, and then you're a good son. Isn't that right? Just grow up to be obedient, to please mommy. Isn't that right, Mom? He exclaimed. Karen Miller stood pale, clutching onto the doorframe. Steve was even startled. Perhaps her blood pressure had spiked or something worse. Nevertheless, he was relieved that he had finally spoken up. This anger, compounded by resentment, had been fermenting in his soul for far too long. Seeking refuge in her office from her son's unexpected outburst, Karen Miller swallowed a pill for her blood pressure. Steve glanced at her, but his mother waved him dismissively, saying, "Go on, get out of here, I'm fine." Steve quietly closed the door, leaving her to compose herself. Back at home, Karen Miller vented her frustrations to her husband. John Miller gazed at his wife thoughtfully and unexpectedly spoke up. "Karen, what if we've been putting too much pressure on our son all his life? Even so, he turned out to be a good professional, even if not in the way we envisioned. He married well and gave us wonderful grandchildren. But we haven't stopped there either. Because our son didn't conform to our view, we decided to take it out on our grandchildren." Karen looked at him with confusion. Her husband had never spoken such words before. the boy isn't cut out for dance. Where is it written in stone? It's just our personal preference. But our grandson seems to have a talent for it. Why don't we let people make their own choices? We're acting so controlling, John Miller said, offering a conciliatory smile. Karen Miller had always trusted her husband. Although she didn't completely agree with his opinion, she pondered over his words. Adjusting to a different way of behaving was challenging. Taking the first step towards reconciliation was even more difficult for her. Karen Miller needed time to process it all. While she agreed with her husband, a lingering resentment toward her son still lingered in her heart. How could he speak to her that way in front of her colleagues? For a week, she had to endure whispers behind her back. Airing dirty laundry in public, Karen thought to herself. Yet, with time, the obsession faded away. Life returned to its usual course. While meeting her grandchildren at school, Karen Miller couldn't help but reminisce about the argument with her son. She hadn't seen Steve since that significant quarrel. It was his wife who greeted the children after school. 2 months later, Karen Miller mustered the strength to make peace. The silly feud needed to come to an end, and moreover, she missed her youngest granddaughter, Emily. The family was now at peace. Karen Miller made a sincere effort not to offend her son and daughter-in-law, and they appreciated this gesture of goodwill. I hope you enjoyed this story. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more awesome stories in the future. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey, and we'll see you next video.